There are a ton of photographers out there who would try to convince you, get you to believe the idea that manual shooting is the only way to go. Anything else is amateurish, it's unprofessional, you should stay away from it, and they will shame you for using any other settings or any other modes in your camera. Now, while I do truly believe that understanding and grasping the different elements of your camera is vital towards creating decisive pictures, crafting an image rather than just taking a snap, you don't have to go all the way into manual all the time, nor do you have to go in all the way to learn everything. You can take little steps along the way. The truth is that there are 4 major modes that are on most modern cameras. One on one end is fully automatic, the other one is fully manual, and in the middle there are 2 that are sort of semi-manual or semi-automatic, whatever which way you want to look at it, that are incredibly useful. A lot of people will look down on these modes, they will consider them to be unprofessional, but the truth is that professional photographers all around the world use these 2 modes all the time because they don't care what other people think. They don't care about the image of them, they care about the image that they're creating, and in certain circumstances these are ideal for a lot of work. So let's break down what these 4 different modes are, how they work, what they do, and how you might actually use them in your own work. Before we get into that, I just want to quickly say that there is another video that I've done that breaks down what shutter speed, what aperture, and what ISO is, and I will try to place it right up there if I remember to. If you don't have the basic understanding of that, you might want to go watch that before you watch this video. And the other thing I wanted to mention is that when it comes to ISO, the modes don't actually control ISO. ISO is usually where you set it, so 100, 200, 300, etc. The higher the number, the more sensitive to light the ISO is. Also, there is an auto mode that you can set ISO to specifically, so you can use auto ISO, in any mode, including full manual if you want to. That's a separate thing, and it does intersect with everything I'm going to talk about, but we might get into that on another day. So let's break down the 4 different modes. The first one, of course, is the most straightforward, and we should have basically breezed through this pretty fast. Program mode, also known as priority mode, also known as automatic. It is usually marked as a P on your dial, and basically it is the camera controls everything in there. It'll set your shutter speed and set your aperture, and you just click that button, take your snap, and it will do its very, very best to meter the scene in front of it and try to get the exposure somewhere sort of in a middle gray scenario. It doesn't want it to be too dark, it doesn't want it to be too light, it wants it to be just perfect. And if it's a bright sunny day and you're in the backyard with your family and you just want to take a snap, you may get some great shots. But if you're in a very, very bright scenario, say I live in Australia, but say you're in a very snowy environment and you try to take a shot, there's so much white in the image that it thinks it's overexposed, it will try to bring it all back down, and your snow ends up being nasty and gray looking and horrible, and everything looks dirty. Not really ideal. Same thing if you try to take a picture in a darker environment, and maybe that darker feel, that haunting feel or that evening feel is what you want, but the camera will look at that and go, oh no, it's too dark, we're underexposed, and it will start pumping things up a little bit to try to compensate. One problem with that is you can end up with a lot more noise in your image. The other problem with that is that by opening up your shutter speed, by having a longer shutter speed to allow more light in, you can have a lot extra movement in your camera, a lot of blurry little lights moving around and looking horrible and weird. Not really ideal again. App or automatic mode is useful in a very small range of scenarios. Moving along, the next one is aperture priority, and as the name really suggests, aperture is the one that you're focused on, so you have control of that, and the camera will control the shutter speed. And this is very, very useful for things such as getting some separation. If you know a little bit about aperture, you know that with a wider aperture, you have less depth of field, and so if you take a photograph of something very close, such as this microphone, everything in the background is going to be blurry. and that may be exactly the look, the feel that you want. So you're going to set the aperture wide, and it's going to stick there. It's going to stay exactly where you want it. And the camera is, as you move around, as you take pictures, it's going to adjust the shutter speed to try to get that perfect balance for you without you having to worry about it too much. This means that your aperture stays consistent. It stays what it is, what you set it to be. So you have that choice made, and it's adjusting to match. Same thing is if you are taking a picture, say it's an event. Say there's an event out there, and you want to make sure that you get everything all the way. You're going to want to stop down a little bit. You're going to want to have a smaller aperture. And so you can set that. It's locked there exactly where you want it to be, and it will adjust the shutter speed accordingly to make that happen. The downside of this, of course, is shutter speed is changing all the time. So if you do take a picture of a group of people in a large room, maybe the light is a little bit dim, the shutter speed needs to be longer in order to take a good exposure, and you have to be very careful about shakiness, about hand motion, and that sort of stuff. Which brings us to the next mode, shutter priority. It's the exact same as aperture priority, but inverted. It will select the aperture for you, you select the shutter speed. Great example is, yes, exactly, the one that I would go for in most scenarios doing event photography, a party, so a lot of people moving around, live bands, that sort of thing. I'm going to choose shutter priority. I know that 1/60 is a good shutter speed for handheld, considered photography. 1/100, 1/120 and up is really, really ideal for movement. If I'm swinging my camera around a lot, if I'm moving around, that's kind of a very fast event, then I want to go even higher. So I want to lock those in. I don't want those to go under. I don't want to have too much camera motion blur in my image. I want it to be exactly where I set it to be, but the aperture can shift. As long as I'm focused on my subject, I may or may not care about whether the background's in focus or not. It doesn't matter. This is a party. These are a lot of people talking. That girl there with the dress on, chatting with that guy, that's my subject. I focus on that specific range and snap, take my picture. The aperture adjusts to make sure that that works properly. If the background's in focus or not, like I said, doesn't really matter. After this, the final one, of course, is manual. It's full manual where you have control of everything yourself. Now, I do love shooting in full manual, and I shoot that way a lot of the time. But full manual is for, in my opinion, considered shooting. When you're doing product photography, as I do over here quite a bit, I have time. I have control of my lights. I have control over my sets. I can sit, I can take a shot, I can look at it and go, that needs to be altered, this needs to be changed. I can adjust my settings and redo that same shot, because nothing is momentary in product photography. Everything is controlled. It's for considered photography. If I'm out in the field and I'm taking pictures of a flower, a close-up shot of a flower, camera's on a tripod, it's angled there, I've got time to think, I've got time to work, it's considered. Manual is perfect. But in a lot of cases, a lot of scenarios, aperture or shutter priority are a lot more useful. To be honest, I don't really use aperture priority a great deal. That tends to fall more into when I'm using manual anyway, so it doesn't really bother me too much. But shutter for priority is absolutely essential for, like I said before, bands, live events, event photography. If I was to be going to the beach with family and I wanted to capture some shots of people running around and doing stuff and having fun, just sort of a family snapshot sort of stuff, yeah, I'd definitely be using shutter priority. If I was doing sports, I would probably lean into shutter priority because I have control over my shutter speed. I know that I can grab a crisp, sharp, clean image without any worries with that. It's not going to fail on me. So the other thing that I wanted to mention is that these two modes, aperture and shutter, the ones that are in the middle, are also incredibly useful to you if you are a beginner or just starting out and you don't really understand how these things affect your image at this point, because you can play. Now here's the thing, with manual, you have to control three different things. You have to control your aperture, your shutter, and your your ISO. And so there will be a lot of shots. If you go straight into that, there'll be a lot of shots that fail completely. You've just got things completely messed up and you need to readjust to get it right, which can be a little bit disheartening for beginning photographers. You're going to get a lot more usable or decent shots if you stick to aperture or shutter and focus on understanding what that does. For example, aperture, you can set your aperture wide open and take a huge amount of shots. They will all work out okay, generally speaking, because the camera's handling shutter for you, and then you can figure out exactly what that does. Then you can close it down and take the same things again with a smaller aperture, and you can compare those images side by side and go, okay, so this is what aperture does, this is what the effective aperture is, this is how I use it in the field. And then you jump over to shutter and you do the same thing. It's part of the learning process. These are very, very useful tools for learning. But again, like I said, keep in mind, anyone that tells you that you have to shoot in manual, they're full of crap. You use whatever works to get the job done. And the truth is that professionals across the world use shutter priority way more than you actually think. I've been rambling. I've been kind of more off the cuff than I usually am. But yeah, thank you for your time. I hope this has helped. If this has illuminated anything, please let me know in the comments below. And if you have any further questions, don't hesitate to ask. I'm more than happy to answer them in the comments down below. Thank you, and yeah, take care.